Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is Greenium webinar about carbon credits market and carbon offset in the US market, and also we will discuss how Greenium solution can help to accelerate, to improve this market. With us we have Zachary. Zachary, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us again today.
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me over. So today, like Asaf said, we're going to be talking about the carbon credit market, why it's important, what carbon offsets are, and how we can be a bigger part of it.
Yeah,
so without further ado, let's just get right into it. So first things first, here's the disclaimer. We're not offering any financial advice. We're not offering any sorts of trading, and we hold no responsibilities to any customer choices in the carbon credit market. This presentation is not to be reproduced or transmitted, and it can change at any time. So what's a carbon credit? A carbon credit is a permit to enable a company to produce carbon emissions. It is quantified as 1 metric ton of CO2 or any equivalent amount of greenhouse gas with the same polluting properties. And it's designed to get companies to still be allowed to pollute, but not have any environmental impact. The goal eventually is to reduce the amount of carbon credits that companies are allowed to use to the point where they're required to essentially be entirely green. The way that carbon credits work is they go through a process of creating projects that can counterbalance fossil fuels and pollutants. And those projects we call carbon offsets. Those carbon offsets are able to, like I said, counterbalance these fossil fuels and pollutants and allow the company to pollute a certain amount and still be green. The carbon credit progression or life cycle starts off with the projects that I've mentioned. You have organizations that either fund or pay for these projects that reduce greenhouse gases or take out greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and they're attributed carbon credits. These carbon credits can go out onto multiple markets that traders and buyers can buy and sell at different prices, and they can eventually be retired. The last owner of these credits that owns these credits is able to take the intellectual rights of these offsets. Eventually, it's taken out of circulation and you're able to restart the process all over again.
Right, so it can be retired only one time in the involuntary market, correct?
Exactly. It's only done one time, and you either have to go through multiple projects to get new credits, or if the project is over a long period of time, the project might itself create new carbon credits.
Okay.
So the market that I was talking about, there's two big ones. There's the primary market and secondary market. The names are interchangeable. Primary is oftentimes called the compliance or involuntary market, and secondary market is often called the voluntary market. Two big differences. The primary market is required by the government. Certain states in the United States, for example, California, Massachusetts, create standards for companies, public companies, where a certain percentage of their fossil fuel emissions need to be counterbalanced by credits. In a primary market, these companies are required to buy credits to offset them. In the voluntary market, these credits are able to be bought and sold as a corporation pleases. If a corporation doesn't want to buy any extra credits, they're totally able to do so, but there's incentives to go along with it. Banks and hedge funds tend to play a big role in it. They increase the prices, decrease the prices, and it tends to be a very fluctuating market where people can buy and sell and make a profit. The big similarity between the two of them is that it promotes the carbon credit market, which is good for everybody because it creates a more green environment, but it also makes certain corporations more money too. So it's a very investable market. Today, we're going to be talking primarily about the secondary market or the voluntary market. So like I said earlier, it's primarily between banks or hedge funds or corporations that just want to make an extra profit on it. There's 5 main entities. We have project developers, we have traders, we have end buyers, we have brokers, and we have standards. The processes you see in the image to the right is you start at the standards, you go through project developers, they sell these credits to brokers, traders, and retailers. Eventually you have this end buyer, which gain the offsets. But let's get into each one specifically. So end buyers, like I mentioned earlier, take the credit for the greenhouse gases and are attributed these carbon offsets. Notable names are Amazon, Google, many oil companies, airline companies. You have Delta, JetBlue, Shell. All these companies tend to buy these carbon credits in order to offset the amount of greenhouse gases they're inevitably going to produce. You have airline companies that are they emit a lot of fossil fuels through their planes. Oil companies, I feel like that's self-explanatory, but then there's also Amazon and Google through their technology and through their vast supply chain, create lots of fossil fuels or use a lot of fossil fuels. Then you have traders, which purchase these carbon credits in high volumes. They're the main members of this market, of the secondary market. They gain these massive amounts of credits. They create portfolios and then eventually sell them to buyers, which are able to gain these offsets. The way that these traders and end buyers interlink is oftentimes through brokers. There are some platforms that are attributed to this market, but brokers are still used in order to connect these buyers and sellers. Oftentimes, though, they don't always disclose how much carbon credits should actually cost, and they make a good amount of commission. The amount of the commission is oftentimes not known to end buyers and traders because they're able to close off that information. Project developers, these are the individuals that are primarily responsible with creating these projects, and they're the start of the food chain. They're in charge of projects aimed at reducing carbon emissions or taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And typically they are in charge of their projects are afforestation projects, food management, wasteland management, and you can see the picture depicted on your right, what's the primary sources of these projects.
What do we see on the right side? It's a bit like small font there. Can you explain a bit the graphs and the axis?
Yes, of course. So the orange are improved forest management. These are projects that improve forests and they're able to gain carbon credits from it. To the left axis is the size of these projects, and to the bottom axis is the location, whether it's a global, regional, or country-specific type of project. Typically, these are the most common ones. You can see that purple are carbon capture projects, blue are wetland restoration projects, yellow are afforestation and reforestation projects, green are avoided conversion projects, and like I said, the orange pinkish color is improved forest management. So these are the primary projects created. Some notable project developers are Carbon Better and EcoAct. They really do a good job of creating these projects. Finally, the entity or the participant that is in charge of all of this are called standards. So these are usually nonprofit organizations that are in charge of validating each step of the process. They have more power in the primary market than the involuntary market, but they still are important for all. They validate that the project will actually create a positive impact on the environment and take out a certain amount of greenhouse gases. They make sure that each owner only has one carbon credit and that it's not double counted. And they check to see that everything is in progress correctly.
And they work, each one is responsible on a specific region, or they work all of them in the entire country?
So a lot of them, they're different organizations, right? So many different companies can pick and choose which registry or which standard there is best at, but a lot of them are either stationed either in the US, there's some that are stationed in the US, different parts of the US, that make it easier for companies to use them.
Okay.
So how do you get these carbon credits from these organizations? You can do it in two primary ways. First, if you are interested in doing it, you can go through a company that rates a project. You give them all the information, all the technical details on the project, what type of project you want to do, and they rate how much it would cost and how many carbon credits you can gain out of it. But these organizations don't actually give you the carbon credits. The organizations that give them to you are the ones that I was talking about, the standard. Examples are the American Carbon Registry, you have the Carbon Fund, Verified Carbon Standard, or also called VERA. There's two names for that last one.